Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm attempting to defeat the Martin bot without any pieces. Wise viewer, you're probably wondering how. That's impossible. Well, with a little bit of magic, I can make my pieces disappear. I'll select blindfold pieces, and now, my board is empty. But don't worry, you guys will still be able to follow along. On the mini board, you can see what I see, and on the big board, you'll be able to see the actual game. And for my eval bar enthusiasts, I'll be adding the eval bar on the side. I will do a game review at the end to see how I did. Alright, I'll start with my usual D4. And my hope is that I'll be able to remember the position based on patterns, right? Because there's no way for me to remember each individual piece, but I can remember, say, the London system setup. So for me, that would be pawn on c3, pawn on d4, pawn on e3, bishop on f4, and instead of remembering each individual piece, I can just say I have the London system setup and I know what I'm talking about. All right, we're met with pawn to f5, so it looks like Martin is playing very aggressive. He's playing a Dutch defense against d4. I'll continue with bishop to f4, my regular setup. That's what I'd play in a normal game anyways. We're met with pawn to d6, which is a variation of the Dutch defense, looking for that e5 push eventually. I'll play e3, continuing with my London setup. And we'll see if Martin actually knows what's happening. No, Martin definitely does not know what's happening. We get pawn to a5. And so far, I know that I have d4, e3, bishop to f4. I haven't quite completed my London system setup, and I know that Martin has begun a variation of the Dutch defense, and then, lost his mind a little bit with pawn to a5. So those are the patterns that I have in mind right now. I'll continue with c3, keep it simple, keep it easy to remember. All right, we get knight to h6, which honestly tempts a little bit. Bishop takes h6 just for the sake of messing up his pawn structure. But against somebody as crazy as Martin, I'm going to try to keep my position as simple as possible and wait for something actually meaningful to start capturing. So I'll continue with my regular development, knight to f3, and we'll see what Martin has to say to regular development. All right, we get pawn to c5. This is the only problem with playing blindfold against Martin, is that Martin will play very just crazy moves. I mean, there's not a lot of rhyme or reason to what he's playing. We have a5, c5, d6, f5. So, right, we had the start of a Dutch. We had crazy engine move. We had a knight develop to the side that I decided not to capture. And now we have c5. So he's mixing and matching openings like it's a buffet. And it's going to make it a little bit more difficult for me to remember. But again, I can remember patterns easier than I can remember individual moves. So I can remember that this is a crazy engine move that I've seen across a lot of my videos. My longtime viewers will know that I've complained a lot about engine playing side pawn double moves. c5 is like a Sicilian gone wrong too late in the game. d6, f5 is like the start of a funky Dutch defense. And then knight to h6 is a move that I decided to turn down even though it could have doubled his pawns. I have my regular development so far, and I really don't see a reason to deviate from that. So I'll play bishop to d3. Normal development, I'm looking for knight to d2. Castles, keep it normal. We'll see what Martin has to say. Knight to d7. And this is my other thing. I can remember patterns, and I can remember the relationship between pieces relatively easy. At least more easily than I can remember individual pieces. So instead of trying to remember pawn on f5, knight on h6, knight on d7, bishop on c8, I can remember that I have my bishop pointing at the pawn. I have a bishop pointing at the other knight. This knight's job is to defend the pawn. This bishop's job is also to defend the pawn. And this knight on d7 intercepts the bishop. So with all of those relationships in mind, I do have the option to take on h6, allow the recapture, and then pick up the free pawn on f5. I'm just not sure if that's decisive enough for me to take, because I could get into a position where I play, for example, knight g5, queen to h5, and then like a bishop sack after g6. That's a possibility, but it would also complicate the game if he doesn't fall for it, basically. So I'll continue with regular development. I'll play knight to d2. I just want to keep it plain, easy to remember until there's something significant. Okay, we're met with rook to a7, which does diddly squat, but funny enough, will probably be difficult to remember precisely because of that. And I'll go ahead and castle. If we don't get any change on this f5 pawn on this move, I'll probably follow through with bishop takes h6. All right, we get knight to b8, which surprisingly makes decent sense. We're unleashing the bishop, defending the pawn again. And now I'm in a position where I've completed my development. I've castled, and Martin is still sitting, on this kind of funny pawn structure. this a5 pawn, the rook on a7. He hasn't done a very good job developing, but he's done a very good job of creating a semi-complicated position for me to actually take advantage of. It's worth noting that Martin certainly has not castled yet. So I'm assuming it's only good if I move my pieces towards the center and then look for a way to open up the center. So I'll play rook to e1, and I'm looking for e4, hitting that f5 pawn, and then maybe e5 hitting the d6 pawn, just looking to open up the position. We get queen to c7, which doesn't do that much for his position as far as I can tell. So I'll go ahead and continue with e4. I just want to break open the center and see if I can cause some problems for Martin here. c4. Martin says, this is the moment I tell my kids pay attention. I think he says that when he gives away free material. I think I've noticed that pattern, although I'm not 100% sure. It's not guaranteed, but I think that's the case. We get c4, which is not supported by d5. Remember, we had that d6 move at the beginning of the game from the variation of the Dutch defense. So I have two pieces on this pawn, and Martin should only have one piece defending it. So I think I'm totally in the clear to just take it. I have a pawn on e4 covering the d5 square. So I think I can just take it. I'll take it with my knight. It should just be a free pawn. It feels good to capture, no? It sure does. We get b5 by Martin, which is evidently a pawn jumping in to attack the knight. I would love to play knight to e5, but we still have that annoying pawn on d6, so I'll go ahead and just retreat the knight to d2 instead. We'll see what Martin has to say. What should I do? He plays bishop e6. That bishop is definitely undefended, again, because of that d6 and f5, those two pushes that he made. And it's also on the same file as my rook. So let me think about this. I have a bishop on d3. I have a pawn on e4. So I have two attackers on that f5 pawn, and he has two defenders. But I still have that bishop on f4, who could easily take the knight and remove one of those defenders. So I think I'll play that. I'll take the knight on h6. And am I crazy, or is Martin playing like actually pretty decently? I still haven't received a free queen or anything, at least. I'll go ahead and take on f5 now that he only has one defender and he has to move the bishop. Ooh, that's not going to cut it. He plays pawn to d5. I could take with the pawn, or I could activate my rook. And again, easy to remember because I talked about how it's on the same file as the bishop. Again, those relationships are a lot easier to remember than it is to remember, rook on e1, bishop on e6, and just try to store that in your memory. So I'll take on e6 with the rook, now supported by the pawn. Again, trying to remember those relationships. Queen takes c3. Bites right into the London system pawn structure. Again, I don't have to randomly remember that I have a pawn on b2. I can remember that this is part of my pawn structure and take the free queen. All right, we should be closing in on checkmate relatively soon. We get knight to d7. If I'm not mistaken, there's still a bishop on f8 that's looking at these two pawns, which is quite annoying because it does defend e7. Now, I still have my knight on f3, and it's somewhat in the way because I'd like to play queen to h5 check, start getting more pieces into the game. So I think I can just centralize my knight on e5. Yes, I can. I'll play knight to e5, clear the way for the queen, offer a piece trade, which is totally cool because I'm up material. Now I could take with the d pawn, or I could take back with the rook. And frankly, I see no reason not to take with the d-pawn, right? We took the light squared bishop. He doesn't have either of his knights. He traded one, and we traded the other as well. So my rook is totally fine on e6, anchored by that f5 pawn. So I'll take with the d-pawn instead. And I'm closing my eyes in real life because I'm trying to visualize the position, and sometimes it's easier in my head than it is on the board. Okay, we get rook to d7, which, I'm going to be totally honest, I completely forgot that rook was there, which I actually think I called. But it's just such a random move that has so little to do with anything grounded in reality that it was going to be difficult to remember, and I knew that from the beginning. Okay, we get rook to d7. I think I'm totally in the clear to play queen to h5 now. So I'll play queen to h5 check. And we'll see. I think this is the only move. Okay, we do get king to d8, and I should just have this fork now. Oh, I just realized, not only do I have this fork, but this knight is also hitting this rook. This rook is probably more annoying. I can't remember if I have two pieces here or just one. Did I trade this bishop at some point? No, I think this bishop is just sitting here under attack. Okay. In a real game, this is probably better because it wins more material, but I'll go ahead and take on d7. Wait, do I not have a knight on d7? Oh, this is a pawn. I just realized I'm clicking on a pawn here. Okay, all right. We need to ground ourselves here a little bit. The pawn recaptured on e5, right? We traded knights at some point. So I'll go ahead and continue with... I was still going to try to play knight to f7 check. Holy moly, I need to get a grip on reality. All right, let's walk through some relationships. Let's resettle what the position actually is. Queen on h5, rook on e6. We have two pawns, bishop and knight. We have pawn and pawn, and then we have two rooks, and then our king is on g1 with a couple of pawns in front. Okay, that's our position. Our opponent's position is king on d8, rook on d7, bishop f8, pawn on e7. We have the doubled pawns, the rook in the corner that I was trying to fork, and I don't really remember what's going on over here, but I don't think it matters that much. It should just be pawns. Okay, so we need to defend one of these two pieces. I just realized I said I have a rook on e1 after I said I had a rook on e6. There's just a rook on e6. There's no rook on e1. I'll keep this simple. I'll drop the queen back, defend the bishop with my queen. Okay, b4, which should not be a good move for him at all. It's opening up lines where his king is at the moment. So I'll go ahead and capture. We'll see what Martin's idea was with that. d4. Okay, I forgot that he had a pawn on d5, so this rook was never hitting the bishop, I guess. d4 is a pawn that is just sitting there now. I'm going to bring my rook to the open file. Rook to c1. And I'm trying to centralize my pieces so I can look for active play. Okay, apparently there was a pawn on a5 that could take back. I'm trying to focus on my major pieces. Those are going to be my biggest advantage, and then these two very advanced pawns. As well as the fact that my king is on the last rank, currently with no escape square. I should probably keep that in mind. All right, I think I can target this rook if I just play bishop to b5. So I'll play bishop to b5, have some scope into the king's position, threaten the rook, which is now on c7, which I believe means I can just trade it. Great. We get a rook trade, which is good when we're super up material. The king recaptures, and we'll play the knight to e4. Centralize the knight. Maybe we can play queen c4 next and mate in a couple of moves. All right, d3 just pushes the pawn in my face, but I'll just take it. That's totally fine. Think carefully, you might have checkmate soon. Thank you, Martin. I appreciate the heads up. All right, queen, knight, bishop, rook. Two advanced pawns. Martin is absolutely right. I should definitely have checkmate here soon. The question is, what's the fastest way to do it, and can I get ladder's mate? All right, I think the fastest way to do it is place the queen on d7, cuts off the king, and then wherever the king goes, I can play check, and then place the queen on the square in front of the rook. So I'll play my queen back to d7. Okay, rook to g8 is not going to cut it. We'll play check, and then queen to b7 is forced checkmate. All right, nice. We did defeat Martin, even though we had a huge brain fart in the middle of the game. Let's take a moment to enable my pieces again so I can actually see what on earth is going on. Yeah, that's pretty much what I thought the position looked like. All right, let's check out the game review. All right, according to the game review, I played with 85% accuracy. Martin played with 70% accuracy. Martin played pretty darn well. But unfortunately for me, it's further down on the screen. I can't scroll that far down with my OBS setup. But game review says that I played with 1400 strength, which is maybe not the best. Our chart, though, looks pretty good. It looks like we were winning. At some point, I made a mistake, maybe? Knight to f3, right, doesn't punish. Bishop takes h6. Wait, I wonder why it says you missed an opportunity to tactically win a pawn. Okay, bishop takes h6, right. Where's my free... Oh, is it queen to h5, king d7? Cuts off the bishop, and then the queen takes. I'm sure that's what it wanted. Check. King can't castle. Free pawn. All right, that makes decent sense. But besides that, we played a pretty solid game. It looks like we didn't miss anything else besides that. If you guys did enjoy this video, please consider liking and subscribing. And I will see you guys in the next one.